Welcome to HR 2026, right? Now, today is the first session, and the course of the lecture today would go on like for initial 15 to 20 minutes. I would talk upon what are we going to do for next 45 days. Yes, and after which we would get into the first subject, that is polity. Right, we are going to start off with polity and then get into geography, and then you would have environment. I think you have gone through the schedule. Yes, and on every weekends you have CSET, right? And I can definitely tell you that this is one of the finest times to start the prelims preparation for a reason. That I understand most of you are in a transition to from mains to prelims, but I would say the time that has been chosen with respect to this particular session such that it keeps your rest of the day intact, right? So that even if you're continuing with your prelims examination preparation, you're having the rest of the day intact, so you can continue the rest of the day with your mains syllabus. All that you will have to do is after the session you will have to spend extra 1 hour on revision of the notes of that particular session, right? So that should be the day planning that you can actually think about when you look at next 45 days. Okay. Now, when it comes to what are we going to do for next 45 days, the first thing that we would definitely cover is most of your GS. I'm being very categorical here. I will not talk about whole of your GS, but rather most of your GS, because I don't need whole of my GS for prelims examination, right? Then you would also have your coverage of CSAT, which is going on the weekends. Every Sunday it has been interspersed into the schedule such that you have periodic understanding and periodic assessments. Now, one thing that you'll also have to understand is, along with this weekend session that is going on, you will also have your weekly progress sheets. When we say weekly progress sheets, that once you finish the session, you would have certain bunch of questions to be solved for that week. It's like weekly assignments. I don't want to call it as assignment because we are no more in college. Okay? So it will be something like weekly progress sheet where you actually look into what is going on with respect to your CSET. Now, when we look at the GS part that we are going to do, we would be having your class notes, which is pure dictation, and sometimes you'll have to get into running notes. For instance, subjects like geography would demand some extent of running notes because it's a bit conceptual. For instance, some subjects like S&T would demand some element of running notes. But most of the time, wherever it is required, it will go on with dictation. 1. 2. You would have subject specific handouts. Now, when I'm talking about these handouts, I'm being very specific and very categorical here. That these handouts are not some random handouts, or these handouts are not talking about bulky nature of the material. What are we going to specifically talk about this? It is completely the fact dose of that subject. Now, when I say fact dose of that particular subject, you have to understand that all the factual elements present in that subject will be compiled into one particular handout. When I say one particular handout, for every subject we have around 3 handouts, right? That is the approximate calculation that you have, around 18 to 19 handouts, and it is not bulky, again around 20 pages per each handout, where all of your factual compilation is at one place. We are only doing the factual compilation, nothing to do with the overall subject again, right? Again, factual compilation is not some random facts which are constantly present in the exam, those areas. The third thing that we are going to do here with respect to GS is, we are going to cover techniques. When I say techniques, this is little bit different from previous HR batches that I have done. For this year, more to look into the execution part of it. When we look at these techniques, I am going to teach you one technique per session. And you please understand, when I say techniques, it is not random elimination techniques. Again, we are only focusing upon subject specific techniques. When I say subject specific techniques, you have to understand that every subject would have some bunch of techniques to be remembered, bunch of techniques to be applied. And whatever technique dimension that we are doing when we are solving, that I would anyway show towards the end of the session today. We are going to handle one technique per session. And when I say one technique per session, one thing is very clear. Once you finish this particular technique on that day, you are going to have some take home tests on that particular technique. When I say this take home test on that particular technique, again I am being very specific here. That means you are going to practice that technique on your own. Because what we have understood and what we have come across when we spoke to students was they were facing an issue with respect to execution of the technique in the exam hall. So what we have decided was that we are going to get into this take home test for every technique, every subject, right? And what is the major focus of practice for us here? It is majorly PYQs. It is majorly PYQs is the factor of focus for us in this particular dimension. The fourth aspect that we would cover as part of this dimension is subject specific generalizations. When I say subject specific generalizations, I would start every subject with bunch of generalizations. Now I can definitely tell you that this is the only program in the whole country which teaches you the logic behind every elimination technique. Right? On record, I'm telling you with confidence, this is the only program which teaches you logic behind every technique. One. And whatever logic I'm teaching you is fundamentally based upon the subject specific generalizations. There are some bunch of generalizations that you will have to keep as we progress. Again, you would understand what these generalizations would mean. Based upon these generalizations, you would have techniques being derived, and based on that, you will be able to solve the questions, right? So that is another important dimension that we would cover as part of GS. Then apart from that, when we talk about this GS, you would also have your tests. If you would have gone through your schedule, you would see that every subject almost there are two tests which are present almost every 2 days once or every 3 days once. You have a test being conducted on that particular subject, right? This is the overall cluster that we are going to do. More importantly, what am I going to focus across my sessions is, it is majorly going to be the paper management as well. Why? Because when you look at this exam, if I have to tell you, if I'm saying, say you're prepared for prelims for, say that is 100% composition, I would tell you 30 to 40% is knowledge. Again, 30 to 40% is approximately techniques, and the remaining proportion is what? Paper management. What should be done when you get the paper, or how should you attempt the paper? What should be the sequence of the attempt? What should be the nature of the attempt if you open the question paper, if you don't know many questions at a stretch? What is the technique that you are supposed to follow? What kind of methodologies are applied there? I would also discuss with number of probabilities. And when I say this paper management, I am being very categorical on option management as well. When I say option management, in the recent past you observe that UPSC question paper is becoming tough not because of the questions but because of the options. In fact, that has been the trend, but now it has become little more tough. And not only that, not only the nature of the options, but also the pattern of the options are making it tough. If you look at, for example, 1 only, 2 only, 3 only, or the statement based questions, or the multiple column matching. Now, again, I'm telling you, I think I already spoke in the prelims orientation session that this year we can anticipate this multiple column matching to be coming back into the examination. Although we had a sample of this in 2024, just like last year, how we had statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, that was the anticipation that was seen. And these three was already seen in 24. There were some samples of this and they used this particular technique and filled the paper last year. It is anticipated that we are going to have this 3-column matching which is going to come back into the options. So I would majorly focus upon, in case if you have certain option arrangements, if in case if you have some option pattern, what should be the methodology of management is what is my major focus when I'm talking about paper management, right? So this is one more element that we're going to cover as part of GS, right? That means if you observe what are we going to do for next 45 days, it's very clear. We are going to cover every component of the exam. I am not going to leave any loose ends. When I say loose ends here, I am not only going to cover your knowledge, I will also cover techniques. When I say techniques, not random techniques, there is a logic behind every technique, and what is the logic manifesting in the form of generalizations, right? And these are not ChatGPT generalizations, and these are purely exam intelligence generalizations which are not found anywhere in this country. Again, on record, these are my own generalizations which have been generated over a decade of experience with the examination. I have a decade-long experience with the examination, and when I say this, and these are the manifestations of all of my experience, right? And those are going to be helping you how to manage your technique and how are you going to solve the question. Now, when I talk about each subject, how am I going to cover each subject? Now, the first component of each subject that I would talk about is I would majorly talk about what is the weightage of the subject. On an approximate weightage, for suppose if I am talking about polity, I have a weightage of 12 to 19 questions. The range has been huge, right? So if I take an average, I would see there could be 15 questions which are coming from polity. So subject specific weightage first I would indicate. Then I am going to talk about what is important for that year. Now, when I say for that year, I just thought that I'll show you some sample. Now, this was the notes of last year. Okay, this was last year HAR notes. Now, if you just go through, because first we are starting polity. Now, these were the important areas which were given for last year. Okay. Now, if you observe this, you can definitely see that I did not emphasize much on judiciary, right? But this year we are going to have coming back of judiciary into the picture, right? Now, you simply go through this. I can tell you the document date. Now, I have the hard copy of another student. This was one more student. The date of this particular page was 20th November 2024, right? It is written here. I don't know whether you can see it. It is 20th November 2024 and exam was in 25th May 2025. Now just see this. Directly we'll go to question number 51. I think from there we have polity starting. This is 2025 question paper. Okay. Right, fantastic. Now, one topic that we have seen is with respect to what? Fundamental rights, DPSP, and what did I tell you? Verbatim of it. When I say verbatim of it, you see this particular question here. What are they asking you? They're asking you verbatim of it, right? So one area is definite. Okay. And don't worry, in this also I would have given certain mnemonics to remember the exact verbatim of this, right? If you want, I can scroll down and show you the verbatim dimension. Now look at this second dimension that I was talking about is dimensions of federalism. One was legislative power, two, center-state relation, three, governor, seven, schedule, residuary. Right? Now what is this question upon? Question upon governor, right? Next. I was talking about 7th schedule, if you remember. Look at that question. 58th. Now, what am I telling you? I am not telling you exact dimension of it, but rather I am able to guess what are the important areas for this year. What are the important areas for this year? Okay, you're not. I'll show you some more, right? Now, institutional components मैंने बताया. क्या बताया इसमें? Zonal council, interstate council, finance commission, and interstate river water disputes. This is what? Institutional. I have not written this right now, and this is not my handwriting. Okay, I have shown you the date 20th November 2024, the first batch of HAR last year. Okay. Where is that organization? I think 54 or 53. What's the first one? Interstate Council. What is the third one? No post-mortem analysis. Pure experience. Right? Okay. Let's see some more. Local governance. What am I talking about? 5th and 6th. Definitely we'll have a question on 5th. वो तो पक्का है. वो तो इस साल का भी important question है. ना. 56. Right? Out of the 8 questions in these 2 pages, I know the important areas of 5 to 6 at least. Now, what does that mean? That means that we have certain components ready. And when I say high impact revision will be majorly centered around these important areas. Now, one question might arise, sir, what if UPSC drifts away? It doesn't. The second question is, what if UPSC sees your class? Don't worry, right? We can still have a methodology to manage those. So the second area that I'll definitely talk about is what is important for that year, and we would actually focus upon what's going to be coming, right? The third aspect of that particular subject coverage that I'm majorly focusing upon is, again I told you, important areas. Okay. Now the third aspect that we are going to look into whenever we are covering a subject is, as I already told you, we would have a bunch of generalizations. And for this year's HR, right, last year we had general generalizations, but this year HR, I am going to get into thematic generalizations. That means if this is the theme, what are the generalizations that you are going to apply? Right? So that is going to come into the picture for this year. Then we would also have the specific content, and when I say content, we are only focusing upon the snippet notes. When I say snippet notes, I already told you that we would have some notes, something very similar to this, right? Now these are bunch of generalizations that we had last year, right? And snippet notes is what? Very short. You're not going to have some hundreds of lines in that. Or what are you majorly going to have is you're just going to have the core part of it, right? If you look at this, this is just a point. So when I say that, this is just a point, right? So this is what is going to be meant by snippet notes. Okay. Next, the fifth dimension of this, as I already told you, that we would cover techniques. We would cover techniques of that particular subject, and these two are interlinked to a larger extent. Those two are interlinked to a larger extent, that generalizations and techniques are converging. How are we going to use techniques? Generalizations, right? But there will be some techniques where there is no logic, right? For example, some technique in environment. There is one particular technique in environment where you don't have any logic, right? There is one more technique in general overall paper where by looking at the option pattern you will be able to guess that what is the answer. There is no logic there. But what is going to work out for us in such kinds of techniques is pure pattern analysis, right? Pure pattern analysis. What is the nature of the pattern that UPSC is following with respect to some set of questions and some set of subjects, and we would fundamentally get into the application of those techniques, right? So some techniques will go out of generalizations, and most of the techniques will lie on generalizations, right? So this is what we are going to do overall for every subject to a larger extent. Okay. Now, one more small dimension that you have to remember when I'm talking about important areas. Now, these are not some random areas, but rather this is purely based on experience, right? I have some bunch which are ready for polity this year. I told you one example is judiciary is going to come back into the question paper very strongly, right? For a reason that you see a lot of activities going on around judiciary, right? Now, in that context, when I say this would also have certain coverages of current affairs. Now, when I say current affairs, it is not specifically current affairs, but rather static centered around current affairs, right? And as I was talking about what are we going to cover in GS also, please add that you have your current affairs which are covered in 30 hours towards the month of April, right? In the month of April, we would cover 15 months current affairs, which is approximately coming out to be around 100-120 pages of notes, and where you can be rest assured that you would have around 8 to 13 questions from that particular notes, right? Now, when I say this, I say that with conscious, I say this with experience, I say this with proof, I say this with evidences, and not post-mortem approach. Okay? Right? So this is what is going to be the schema for the next 45 days of HR. Now, getting into the first subject, that is polity. Now, when you look at polity, you have to understand. Now, this is one subject which any given day you will have to be strong. I'm not telling medium, you'll have to be strong. When I say strong, you should be able to arrive at 80 to 90% of accuracy. When I say 80 to 90% of accuracy, if you're solving 10 questions, you should be able to get at least 8 questions right, is what is the target. Now, because when you look at certain subjects where you cannot opt to be weak in those subjects, one is polity, right? The second one is any given day economy. And the third one that I keep telling is geography to a larger extent, because it is conceptual in nature. That I would deal little later, probably on the third, fourth day of HIR. As we start, I would talk about those subject dimensions, what to be focused. Okay. Now, when you look at polity, we approximately have 12 to 19 questions from this subject, where I would say 15 questions on an average is what is the weightage of polity every year with respect to prelims, right? And the beauty of the question paper has been they're giving one subject at one place. As I just showed you, that when you look at 2025, we find that what is happening? Polity has been given at one place, right? So we have that coming up from the question paper. Not all the questions, at least the major cluster of it is given in one place. Now, when look at this as a subject, you see there are certain important areas with respect to this subject. Now, one such important area of the subject which is always evergreen is constitutional principles. This is evergreen. Always a weightage of one question at least is going to come into the picture from this. The second important area for this year again fundamental rights, DPSP and fundamental duties. There is no doubt in this again. Right. Another important area for this year is going to be fundamental rights, DPSP, fundamental duties, because every year we have a cluster from this. The third area which is going to be important this year again, mostly the aspects of cooperative federalism. Mostly we are going to see the aspects of cooperative federalism. 4. The parliamentary procedures is another area which is going to be important this year. Parliamentary procedures is going to be another important area this year. The fifth important area that any given day again evergreen is 5th and 6th schedule. Any given day the evergreen area is 5th and 6th schedule. More importantly, the comeback of judiciary is going to be very strong this year. And when I say comeback of judiciary is going to be strong this year, it could be majorly with respect to legal aid, legal mechanisms, and judicial or jurisprudence in the country to a larger extent is what is going to come back to the paper. Then the seventh dimension which is important as usual again we have is organizations. Now every year we have questions on organizations. Just like in 25 also we had some bunch of organizations. But the problem with these organizations is what? They're very random. Right? For example, if you look at 2025, we had a question on Automotive Board of India, something like that was there. Right? But one more organization was PNGRB, Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board. And it was asking about what are the functions of PNGRB. But the beauty of PNGRB is we had a question on PNGRB in 2019 already. So if you are able to decipher what is going on with PNGRB based on 2019 question, you could solve this question. But that particular automotive board, that particular section, you could have solved that question based on the generalization that I would give with respect to organization. So the other area is going to be organizations, right? Eighth dimension is, this time we are going to specifically see certain constitutional offices. Right, certain constitutional offices are going to come back here again. Now, to a larger extent, you would see Attorney General, CAG, something related to Election Commission, Attorney General, CAG, something related to Election Commission, and any given day, the hotspots are Governor and President. Any given day, the hotspots are Governor and President. And one dimension that we can look out for is Deputy Speaker this year. One dimension that we can look out for is Deputy Speaker this year. Right? So, those constitutional offices are going to be important again for this year. Right? That means one thing is very clear, what we are going to cover in HR every year is going to be different. and that is purely based on what is going to be important for that year, right? And that I'm making it a very, very clear cut statement when we talk about these dynamics, right? Now, these are some important dimension, but one small observation that you would always have to make is some aspects of governance are also being asked, which is, again, when I say this governance, it is mostly schemes based. And UPSC has made it a point that from last 3 years, in fact, they're definitely questioning two schemes, right? They're definitely questioning two schemes, and every year we have questions on schemes. In fact, the range has been to a larger extent 2 to 4. Sometimes we had 4 questions on the scheme, sometimes we had 2. So the range has been between 2 to 4, right? And this part we would cover as part of current affairs, because we still have around 4 or 5 months of governance to be undertaken for us to write this prelims exam, right? So our cutoff is going to be majorly with respect to March. ठीक है, so till then we'll have to wait and we'll have to observe. ठीक है, so this is another important thing that you'll have to remember. Another important area that you'll have to remember is this year we have a separate cluster on international relations, right? In fact, this is the first HAR season that we are going to cover international relations separately for prelims examination, right? Now I think I've allocated around 3 sessions for that IR. Now again, here I'm being very specific when I'm talking about IR, although I used to cover it in current affairs specifically, but this year we have made it a point to bring it back. We are mostly going to look at the generalizations of international relations. I am not going to teach you all the relations which are not very specific, which are not very important to the exam, but rather most of the international relations in those 3 sessions I would only handle dealing with generalizations, right? There are some bunch of generalizations for international organizations, certain regional organizations, certain relations, and how to deal and how to answer those questions without knowing anything about that particular relation is my focus, and that could be taken with respect to those sessions. Okay. Now we'll get into the what is the division with respect to those 15 questions. Now when we look at those 15 questions, approximately, I mean, what is going to be the subject split? Around 8 to 12 questions are direct polity. Now, one controversy, if you would have observed with 2024, there were a number of issues with respect to keys, right? Now, one thing that you have to understand is there is a mindset behind that particular dimension with respect to UPSC, right? I'll slowly talk about that also as we progress. Now, if UPSC is considering a particular answer as key which is different from everybody else, it fundamentally means UPSC has a particular mindset in finalization of key, right? And again, you could see this year around 2 to 3 questions had that conflict. I'll tell you one simple, I'll show you one simple conflict here. In fact, question number 51. You see question number 51. People were talking about an ordinance can amend any central act, ordinance can abridge a fundamental right, and ordinance can come into effect from a back date. Which of the following statements are correct? Now, there were many people who were in fact very skeptical about this statement. They were talking about how can an ordinance abridge fundamental rights. In fact, it is vocally mentioned in Lakshmikant that ordinance cannot abridge fundamental rights. Now, I would say that we will have to look out for this option this year. Why? Because one very strong logic which goes on in UPSC is the logic of can. Right? which fundamentally gives you, or which fundamentally talks about just the potential, not the actual. That is a potential dimension, not the actual dimension. And there were n number of instances where UPSC played upon this CAN logic. And I would say please look out for this option this year. Right now we had a lot of judicial pronouncements on the key of UPSC also. Right. So if you ask me, will that impact the nature of UPSC and the thought process of UPSC? No. That is just a procedural change that is going to happen. Right? We'll have to look out for this. There is one more such question where you will have to look out for option this year again on the basis of the release of the key. Especially this question. 54. The Constitution of India explicitly mentions that in certain spheres the governor of a state acts. That's fine. The President of India can, of his or her own, reserve a bill passed by a state legislature for his or her own consideration without it being forwarded by the governor of the state concerned. Many people have given that this statement is incorrect. Right? I would again tell, look out for this statement this year. Again there is can. Right? Now my counter argument in certain conditions is, what about the condition of emergency? What about the condition of emergency? Now there are certain implicit dimensions during emergency, there are certain explicit dimensions during emergency, right? And you always have to understand that most of the polity that we read is based on something which has already happened. But you also have to understand there is other 20% of it which did not happen. That doesn't mean it cannot happen. And this is one such statement. Right? My take on this is this understanding. Why? Because again, forget about the subject. My belief is UPSC has a very strong logic of can. So look out for this option also this year. We will have to see. Right? So these two questions are those which are to be seen from the side of UPSC, whether what is it going to consider. Okay. So when I say that, we are going to have some direct questions from polity, around 8 to 12 questions. Apart from that, you would also see 3 questions majorly from the political theory. 3 questions from the political theory. When I say political theory, that's more applied. That's more applied to a larger extent, right? And some other set of questions, around 2 to 3 questions coming from current affairs. 2 to 3 questions coming from current affairs. And 1 to 2 questions which are random. I would say don't bother about them, right? For example, there was some question like N. Gopal Swami Iyengar committee. Now, none of us heard about this committee. Okay. Now, after that, we started hearing about this committee. That's fine. Now, you don't have to sit and start analyzing those dynamics there, which are going to be very random, which does not fall under any of these clusters, right? So, the division in the context of polity is very clear. Some are direct. In fact, most of them are direct. Some are applied. Some are current affairs based, right? So this is the division. In fact, this is the split when it comes to polity. Okay. Next, we'll get into generalizations. This is generalizations for polity. Generalizations for polity. The first theme that you will have to write upon is Constitution. Just write down certain generalizations of Constitution. In Indian Constitution, some words are mentioned some words are mentioned. Comma present, comma present. Next, most of the words in Constitution, most of the words in the Constitution are not defined in the Constitution. Most of the words in the Constitution are not defined in the Constitution. Next, or for that same generalization, in bracket you write meanings are generally absent. In bracket you write meanings are generally absent. Next, all this under the theme of Constitution only, right? Next, most of the times principles are present in the Constitution. Most of the times principles are present in the Constitution, but never described. Next, a very less probability of classification of things, a very less probability of classification of things happening in the Constitution. But the criteria for classification is never mentioned. The criteria for classification is never mentioned. Next, there is no time period mentioned in the Constitution. There is no time period mentioned in the Constitution except for the tenures of certain constitutional offices. Except for the tenures of certain constitutional offices. Next, Constitution mostly deals with something which is broad, general, providing a framework, and mostly not the components of the framework. That means, what does that mean? Constitution does not get too much into specificities. And most of the times you see UPSC playing upon this. I'll show you, because The first technique today that we are going to deal is on constitution. Okay. So whatever generalizations, the first bunch that we are discussing today, towards the end, last 20-25 minutes, in fact last half an hour, we would focus on that technique. I have picked up the questions from 2025 till 2019, right? And you would have your takeaway test or take home test on rest of the questions, because this is the first technique that I'm going to show. I thought I'll discuss more questions on this, and surprisingly every year we have 3 questions minimum on this technique. Every year minimum 3 questions on this particular technique. If I show you the cluster there, we have more than 20 plus questions for last 5-6 years, which technically means we have at least 3 questions every year. Okay, we'll see that, right? Next point under the constitution again. Constitution ensures the principles of Constitution ensures the principles of inclusion, participation, and also regulations. In bracket you write general, and also regulations in bracket you write general. Right? Now these are the bunch with respect to the theme of constitution. The second bunch is with respect to the generalizations on federalism. Now what are we discussing? Generalizations, right? Federalism. Okay. Write down. First, everything in Indian federalism is centered around center. Center here means central government, right? Next. Second, local governance is comparatively more inclusive, right? Is comparatively more inclusive. When I say this, when you look at the 3 different sections, be it the center, be it the state, or be it the local governance, if I have to put an order here, I see mostly what is inclusive? Local governance, because I see specific representations being mentioned in your 243D as well as 243T. You have reservation for women, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and as a voluntary provision if the state government would want to give reservation for OBC. But whereas here, what kind of representation? It is majorly scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Although we have reservation for women coming up, but you have to be very clear that this is yet to be implemented here. It is just a provision, it is just an amendment which has been brought in but not into action. So today I think it is not anyway going to be implemented by 2026. That's very clear from the document itself and verbatim of the amendment itself, right? So any given day for today, you see this is more inclusive. Next. Center can control state. Center can control state, but state should request center. But state should request center. Next. Center gives the framework of policies. Center gives the framework of policies. And state fills the components of the policies. And state fills the components of the policies. Last. State functions at the mercy of center. At the mercy of center. Again, I would teach how to apply these principles there, right? Because although we are federal, what is the nature of federalism? Quasi-federal, where you have strong center. That means most of the dictating terms are going to be in the hands of center, right? Next. The third generalization that you're going to have, the cluster, is judiciary. I don't. The most powerful organ in the country. The most powerful organ in the country. Next. Most of the judicial procedures are not mentioned in the Constitution. In bracket you write. Be careful. In bracket you write, be careful with respect to. Be careful with respect to additions made by judiciary. In the process of interpretation of Constitution. Because what we tend to do here is most of us learn this judicial interpretations also as part of the subject. So when you get into the exam hall, what's going to happen when they're asking you about the provisions of Constitution, you're even confused that these interpretations are also part of Constitution. But you'll have to be very, very clear, both are different, right? Again, as I keep telling one particular formula here, whenever you see Constitution, there are different ways of understanding this, right? Especially somebody says, or in fact UPSC categorically talks about original Constitution. When we talk about original Constitution, you always remember original Constitution is all about present Constitution minus amendments. That means what it was before amendments and what it was exactly in 1950. 50. Right? That means before first amendment that has happened to this provision. Now, whenever they say general constitution, which fundamentally would include original constitution as well as the aspects of amendments. Original constitution as well as the aspects of amendments. So one aspect is, if they are saying original constitution, it is the one without amendments. When they are saying general constitution, that includes amendments. And you please understand, there are also certain additions made by judiciary. There are also certain additions made by judiciary. For suppose if I say right to clean environment is part of constitution. Is it so? My question to you is, right to environment is part of constitution. I am not asking about implication. My answer is yes or no. I am asking, right to clean environment is part of Indian constitution. पकड़ लिया ना हमने. Yes? No. This is what I meant. This is what I meant with the last generalization and last caution. It is not part of constitution. It is part of what? Judicial interpretation of the constitution. As part of Article 21. Extension of Article 21 is this. Are you understanding the dimension? The problem in demarcating this is we have been learning. Now if I ask you, right to privacy is part of constitution. Again no. Why? It is judicial interpretation. The principles of right to privacy are provided in the Indian constitution. Yes. Why? Whenever judiciary is interpreting, what it would interpret? It would mostly interpret on the basis of constitutional principles. And Article 21 becomes one principle, based upon which Puttaswamy case and based upon which you have right to privacy. And be very, very clear, when I am saying part of constitution, it simply means verbatim of the constitution. Don't randomly interpret. When I say verbatim of the constitution, is it written? Is what I mean. You don't have these words, no, right to clean environment, is it there? Right is there? No. Are you understanding this dimension? So fundamentally understand, whenever you come across this word constitution, be very clear. Original is different. Constitution as such is different. When they ask you simply constitution, you will have to say what? Original and amended. Inclusion, that means what is it today? That is constitution to me. What was in 1950 is original constitution. And there are certain judicial interpretations. These judicial interpretations are not directly mentioned in the constitution, but rather they are based on constitutional principles. Are you understanding? Right? That is what is meant by that dimension there. Okay. So that is another important thing that you need to remember with respect to judiciary. Then apart from that, next. What's the number under judiciary? Third. Yes, write down. Third. Mostly, everything in India, can be subjected to judicial review. Mostly everything in India can be subjected to judicial review. Right? Why? At the end of the day, part of basic structure. Right? So that is the logic behind this particular understanding. And you have to be very clear that nothing goes without judicial review to a larger extent. Okay? So that is the third generalization that you'll have to remember. Fourth. Fourth generalization on judiciary, especially Indian judiciary. Madam. In Indian judiciary, in Indian judiciary and jurisprudence, in Indian judiciary and jurisprudence, there is mostly a chance of appeal which is provided. There is mostly a chance of appeal which is provided. And please be very clear, my dear. None of the procedures, in fact, in India goes without appeal. Why? Because wherever is the condition of ensuring justice, you always have a case of appeal. Right? Wherever it is. If you're talking about tribunals, you have appellate tribunals. If you're talking about judiciary, if you're talking about lower judiciary, you have High Court. If you have High Court, you have Supreme Court. In Supreme Court, you have a lot of, again, petitions which are present, which is looking at appeal mechanism. So remember this, because I think there are instances around 5 questions which were based upon this particular understanding. That they will simply say this is the procedure and say there is no appeal mechanism present in such procedure. Always remember, anything regarding justice, anything regarding grievance redressal, we always have a appeal mechanism. Because at the end of the day, India is what? Democracy. India is what? Democracy. And appeal mechanism is one of those which is fundamentally ensuring the spirit of democracy. Right? So that is another understanding that you need to have with respect to judiciary. Okay. Next. The fourth cluster that you can keep with respect to the generalizations here is organizations. Organizations. Now, when we look at organizations, we already know that any organization can be classified into 3. Either it is constitutional, either it is statutory, either it is executive. Right? And please understand, one simple trick that I always tell you is, do you have an article of that organization in the constitution? That becomes constitutional organization. Right? For suppose say National Integration Council, constitutional, statutory, executive, none of the above. Now, one question whenever you come across any organization is straightforward put, do I have an article? When it is asking on constitutional. Right? Now, when you look at statutory, you definitely have to have a law. And when you're talking about executive, it is some executive order. Right? It is some executive order, and more often than not, you should be bothered about this. Why? Because you do not know whether you have a law on every organization or not. Now, for suppose if I ask you Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS we say, yes, that is what? Statutory organization. Do we have a law on that? We are not very sure. Yes, but we have BIS Act 2016. Okay. So what does it mean? It is near impossible for us to finish the ambit of statutory. So what should be our focus? This. Why? Because there are never instances where they have asked that which of the following are the executive organizations. Now you fundamentally have to understand, if there is no article in the constitution, then You should only remember it is what both of them are what? Non-constitutional organization. That's all. Because they are never specifically asking which of the following are statutory, which of the following are executive, right? Now, what is the simple logic? Even if UPSC is asking which of the following are statutory, what you can do, whichever has article, you remove, rest of them could be statutory. And they would never play upon saying that yes, they will also give some executive and say, this is also part of stat. They're not going to play upon that. The clear-cut demarcation is whether it is constitutional or non-constitutional. That's all. So if you have an article, it is constitutional. If you don't, it is non. Right? So remember this fundamental understanding. Write down. Write down some generalizations. Most of the times, most of the times, most of the times, the ministry given, most of the times the ministry given is incorrect, but the mandate, of the organization, comma, source of formation of the organization, in bracket you write article or law, in bracket you write article or law or executive orders, close the bracket, are mostly correct, Is this clear? That means if there is a ministry, it is mostly incorrect. Now, again, if I get back to the same question that I was asking you, tell me the Ministry of Bureau of Indian Standards. Ministry of Commerce. Okay. Any other? Health. Okay. We keep hearing about BIS standards. Yes. 3-star, 5-star. BE also. Bureau of Energy Efficiency. That is different. And then what about that BIS? Ministry of Consumer Affairs. Now my question to all of you is, will you start looking at all of the ministries? In the process you can become one. I'm telling you. That's more easier. If you work for 5 years, you can maybe get into one of those ministries, probably. Right? So the process there is non-exhaustive. Now what is the way to tackle that non-exhaustive nature of it? Generalization. And again, sir, who is telling about this generalization? Pattern is telling about this generalization. Can it go wrong? Yes. What is the probability? Can it go wrong? Yes. What is the probability? 30%. Can you get it right? Yes. What is the percent? 70%. So should I apply or should I not? Obvious. Now if I am answering 3 questions, I am damn sure that I will get 2 right, 1 wrong in case. But there is also higher probability that I could get all 3 right. But there is never a probability where you will get 1 correct and 2 wrong. No. That's tested. That is seen, right? Not outside exam hall, but inside the exam hall. Okay, so you will have to believe. And if these generalizations are not being changed from 2016 till 2025, why am I taking these years? Because they are my practical experiences in the exam hall. From 2016 till 2025, if they are not changing, I am damn sure they will not change them in 2026 also. It is not that just because I am not going to write in 26 and you are going to write in 26, they will change. No. They will not change it in 2026 also, because I told you that all of these have been working in these years, right? Yes or no? At least most of those. I don't know, because in the exam hall I did not talk about 2022. Why? Because I have not written that. But outside the exam hall, if I am able to see 2022 based upon 2021, 2023, 2025, I am happily observing that they are able to be applied. Are you understanding this dynamic, right? So this is with respect to organization. Okay. Next, some generalizations, right? Miscellaneous, you put miscellaneous. I know. Any statement which has terms related to good governance, any statement which has terms related to good governance are mostly correct. What are those terms? Those terms are based on tree crap. 1. Transparency, responsiveness, equity, efficiency, and effectiveness, consensus, rule of law, accountability, and participation. Now that means, what is this going to happen? Whenever I see certain terms which are existing with respect to all of this, the statement is going to turn into inclusive statement. The statement is going to turn into positive statement. The statement is going to turn into a progressive statement. And the statement mostly will be constitutional in nature. And any of these statements are what, my dear? These are right statements. Now this is one such universal generalization which we mostly use. If any statement is categorically talking about restricting the public participation, then mostly it is incorrect. If some statement is encouraging public participation, mostly it is right. If something is talking about rule of law, transparency, accountability, efficiency, inclusion, any offshoot and extension of these words, the statement is what? Definitely right statement. Why? Because certain principles most of us do not know, and certain aspects of governance also we are not very sure. In that context, what I would tell you is, please look out for some words which are related to all of this. And what is all of this going to make you? All of this is going to make you what? Make it right statement. Right? And mostly what? These statements could also be broad. Mostly what? These statements could also be broad. So something which is broad, something which is positive, something which is progressive, something which is constitutional, something which is inclusive. All these are what? right statements. Even if you're not aware about that, if you feel this is the condition and this is the criteria which is satisfied, go ahead with that. Is this clear? Right? So that is one more small generalization that you need to remember here. One more generalization, last but one. The role of governor. The role of governor is generally broader than the role of president. Is generally broader than the role of president. In the activities of fifth and sixth schedule, in the activities of fifth and sixth schedule, comma, comma, constitutional discretionary powers, constitutional discretionary powers, constitutional discretionary powers. But it is vice versa or vice versa condition. But it is vice versa. In general administration, in general administration and pardoning powers, it is vice versa in general administration and pardoning powers. Is this clear? That means what? Governor is going to dominate president in the functioning of fifth, sixth, as well as constitutional discretionary, because president doesn't have any kind of constitutional discretionary. But president is going to be dominant in the general administration, because at the end of the day, who is the appointing authority? President, right? As well as in the aspects of pardoning power. Is this clear? Right? Again, the statement is going to bring you a lot of answers in the questions. Okay. Now, these are some of the generalizations which are present with respect to polity. Okay. And always remember, these could be applied across the questions of polity, right? Now, we'll straight away get into the first coverage of the area, that is the constitutional principles. Now, the first aspect of constitutional principles is basics of constitution. And that you write down features of this, features of Indian Constitution. It is dynamic. It is dynamic. 2. It is flexible and rigid. It is flexible and rigid. 3. Institutional establishments or basis for institutional establishments. Basis for institutional establishments. 4. Established procedures. Established procedures. 5. Legal and ethical document. Legal and ethical document. 6. Highest law. Highest law and basis of governance. Basis of governance. 7. Source of rights. Source of rights. Duties. Representation. Source of rights, duties, representation, and ethical framework. And ethical framework. Next. Provides directives. Provides directives to both citizens. To both citizens and the state. And the state. Next. Ensures unity. Ensures unity. Comma social transformation. Comma social transformation. Comma environmental protection. Comma environmental protection. And empowerment of vulnerable sections. And empowerment of vulnerable sections. Next. It guides the evolution of society. It guides the evolution of the society. Guides the evolution of the society, right? Now, one small extension of this, which is going to be important for this year, is various sources, right? Various sources. Now, remember one thing again, that when you look at the 1935 Act, what is it talking about? Mostly the structural aspect of Constitution. 1. 2. The legislative, executive, judicial, financial, and institutional dimension. Legislative, executive, judicial, financial, and institutional. Now, apart from this, we also see some aspects of emergency. We also see some aspects of emergency. Now, when you look at Australia, you know, it is what? Concurrent list. Australia, it is concurrent list and joint sitting. Aspects related to trade. Aspects related to trade. Next, when you look at Canada, it is mostly what? The unitary features, or those which are talking about strong center. Those which are talking about strong center. Right? Now, US, when you look at US, it mostly deals with the philosophical aspects. It mostly deals with the philosophical aspects and the aspects of judiciary. What am I giving you? I'm giving you general. Again, right? I'm not giving you the exact provisions of this because again it is near impossible for us to recollect. But if you're able to have this basic understanding, you will be able to manage, right? So the philosophical aspects and the judicial aspects are mostly given in US or taken from US. When you look at UK, you see that mostly the procedural aspects are taken from UK. Mostly the procedural aspects are taken up from UK, and most of the provisions of parliament or the parliamentary system and the parliamentary aspects and practices are picked up from UK. Now, when you look at France, France majorly deals with what? Liberty, equality, and fraternity, and also aspects of republic, and also aspects of republic. Is this clear? Yes. What about Russia? What are we borrowing from Russia? Majorly aspects of from Russia. What are we picking up from Russia? Huh? Fundamental duties. Anything else? Some aspects of socialist perception. The philosophy of socialist or socialism is majorly picked up from Russia, right? Okay, so that is with respect to what? Sources. Next. The aspects of constitutionalism. Right? Write down. Limited government. Limited government. Next. Citizen centric approach. Citizen centric approach. Next. A rule of law. A rule of law. Next. Protecting the spirit of the constitution. Protecting the spirit of the constitution. Spirit and purpose, you put it that way. Spirit and purpose of constitution. Next. Mostly upheld by the legislations made by government. Next. Prevents arbitrary decisions. Next. Brings in objectivity. Next. Provisions of reasonable restrictions. Provisions of reasonable restrictions. Next, fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are the tools for upholding constitutionalism. Fundamental rights are the tools for upholding constitutionalism. Next, citizens prevail over government. Citizens prevail over government. Next, restricts or regulates the dominance of majoritarian section. Restricts or regulates the dominance of majoritarian section. Dominance of majoritarian section. Next, mostly upheld. Mostly upheld by the legislations. Did I talk about that? Okay. Continue. Mostly upheld. Mostly upheld by judicial interpretations. Mostly upheld by judicial interpretations. Mostly upheld by judicial interpretations. In bracket you write judiciary. Judiciary as the guardian of constitution. Judiciary as the guardian of constitution. Right. So this is with respect to what? Constitutionalism. Right. And this is one question which is every year present. And always you keep seeing this particular word called as limited government. Right. Anything that is limiting the actions of the government and which is prioritizing citizens is what is observed to be constitutionalism. Basic understanding, right? And there is third philosophy which is important again, constitutional morality. Now this is one concept which is coming up from the side of UPSC because you see it present in question paper in 23 in mains, 24 in mains, 21 in mains, 2019 in mains. So we constantly see this being questioned. So if it is in the radar of UPSC, it means it could also come back into prelims, right? Just understand the philosophy right now. Adherence to core principles. Adherence to core principles. And the value system. And the value system of the Constitution. Of the Constitution. In bracket you write democratic norms. In bracket you write democratic norms. Next, it ensures respect. It ensures respect. Next point, it ensures respect for the constitutional democracy. Ensures respect for the constitutional democracy. Next, it ensures the prevalence of rights. It ensures the prevalence of rights over traditions and beliefs. Over traditions and beliefs that are regressive. That are regressive. Next, protects minorities. Protects minorities and shields vulnerable. And shields vulnerable from the stereotypes of public and Victorian morality. From the stereotypes of public and Victorian morality. Now that's very clear, my dear. When we look at morality that we keep talking, one is we see Victorian morality. When I say Victorian morality, that framework which has been laid down by whom? British. Right? And when we look at societal morality, those norms and framework which is laid down by whom? Society. This could also be the morality of the public. And when I say constitutional morality, what does that mean? It is the framework which is laid down by whom? Constitution. And it is observed that this constitutional morality is going to shield the vulnerable sections from Victorian and public morality. Why? Because this could have resulted in some kinds of historical injustice. And constitutional morality is going to what? Is going to rectify the historical injustice which has happened to certain sections of the society. For example, you look at your NAS Foundation case, or you look at Navdev Singh Johar case, or you look at Shabarimala case. In all of these instances, what is observed? You find the constitutional morality is being upheld over public as well as Victorian. For example, you look at Joseph Shine Kamal case. In all of these instances, you find this is upheld, and this is going to shield, and not only shield, but this is also going to rectify the injustice which has happened in the history. And in fact, this is a word which has been used by the constitutional bench, right, to avoid historical injustice, right? So that is one more small understanding that you need to have with respect to this. Okay. Next. One very important part of philosophy is, or philosophy is preamble, right? Write down. Write down certain points here. Part of constitution. Part of constitution. Based on objective resolution. Based on objective resolution. Introduced by Nehru. Introduced by Nehru. Next. Constitute specific objectives and philosophies. Constitutes specific objectives and philosophies. Next, non-justiciable in nature. Non-justiciable in nature. Next, can be amended. Can be amended without affecting the basic structure. Without affecting the basic structure. Next, reflects the vision of independent India. Reflects the vision of independent India. Next, inspired by freedom struggle. Inspired by freedom struggle and global constitutions. And global constitutions. In bracket you write US. Global constitutions, in bracket you write US. Next, considered as identity card. Considered as identity card and political horoscope of Indian Constitution. And political horoscope of Indian Constitution. Next, it highlights the core values, socio-economic goals, and democratic aspirations, and democratic aspirations. Next, fulfilling the ideals of preamble. Fulfilling the ideals of preamble is essential for just and united society. Just and united society. Next, it was amended once. It was amended once. In bracket 42nd constitutional amendment. 42nd constitutional amendment. What it added? Cis. What is that? Socialist. What is this? Integrity and secular. And secular. Right? Now, let's keep this. Objectives. Justice, social, economic and political, liberty, thought expression, belief, faith, worship, equality of status and opportunity, equality of status and opportunity, fraternity, dignity and unity. Fraternity, dignity and unity. Right? The mnemonic could be what? PS here, wet, FB here, anyway, OS, it is Delhi University, D, right? D here is, what is that? Fraternity of dignity and unity. Okay. Next, objective resolution. Objective resolution. Put an hyphen and write features. Objective resolution features. Under that, first, independent and sovereign India. Independent and sovereign India. 2, all power derived from people. All power derived from people. 3, social, political and economic justice. Social, political and economic justice. 4, freedom of thought and expression. Freedom of thought and expression. 5, promotion of peace and welfare. Promotion of peace and welfare. In bracket you write, not in preamble. Not in preamble. 6, safeguard for minority. Safeguard for minority, tribals, tribals and backward classes. And backward classes. In bracket you write, not part of preamble but part of Indian Constitution. Not part of preamble but part of Indian Constitution. Right. Next. Nation versus state. Now, this is mostly cultural entity, but whereas here it is territorial, it is political, it is sovereign, it has a government setup. It has a government setup and the population, the concept of citizenship. The concept of citizenship. Just write down one line. The boundaries of state. The boundaries of state are not coterminous with. The boundaries of state are not coterminous with the boundaries of nation. boundaries of state are not coterminous with boundaries of nation. Next, Article 12 defines the state as Article 12 defines the state as Government and Parliament of India. First point, Government and Parliament of India. 2. Government and legislature of each state. Government and legislature of each state. 3. All the local and other entities, all the local and other entities in territory of India, and under government of India, and under government of India. Next, in R.D. Shetty versus Airport Authority of India, AAI, there is a criteria mentioned. To test the grounds of state. There is a criteria mentioned to test the grounds of state. 1. State as the main funding. State as the main funding entity. State as the main funding entity. 2. Deep and pervasive control. Deep and pervasive control by state. Deep and pervasive control by state. 3. Functional character. 4. Government department transferred to corporation. 5. Monopoly status. Conferred or protected by state. Monopoly status conferred or protected by state. Next, according to the interpretation of Article 12, next paragraph or point you can say, according to interpretation of Article 12, the judicial reforms by judiciary are not considered. The judicial reforms by judiciary are not considered. But whereas the administrative functions of judiciary are considered. whereas the administrative functions of judiciary are considered. Right. Now, when you look at state, majorly three determining factors. One is the government, the other one is citizenship, the third one is the aspects of sovereignty. When I say sovereignty, what is more inclusive here? It is the aspects of political boundaries as well, right? Now, when you look at government, you can broadly have two classifications of government. One is the constitutional government. One is the constitutional. The other one is the non-constitutional. Just write down the differences here. Under constitutional, election process, next public representation, election process, next public representation, next limited government, next republican nature, next specific tenure, next primacy of welfare, next true representation, non-constitutional, unlimited power, no limitation on tenure, no public representation, The other classification could be the parliamentary government and presidential system. The parliamentary and the presidential. Write down the differences. Under parliamentary, dual executive, next collective responsibility, next political homogeneity, next fusion of powers, next dissolution of lower house, next under presidential system, single executive, next no responsibility, next Political homogeneity is not necessary. Political homogeneity is not necessary. Next, separation of powers. Separation of powers. Next, lower house has fixed tenure. Lower house has fixed tenure. Right. Now the second aspect here is the citizenship. Now when you look at citizenship, there are certain terms that you need to understand. Okay. One, it is citizen. Two, non-citizen. Three, refugees, right? And there are some terms which you keep hearing: asylum seekers and migrants. Not our consideration of interest here. Okay? Because you don't find any question coming upon them. Now, when you look at citizens, one simple understanding that you need to have is they have both fundamental rights as well as political rights. They have both fundamental rights as well as political rights. And when I say political rights, it is right to vote as well as right to contest. It has right to vote as well as right to contest. And when you look at fundamental rights in specific for the citizens, you see that it is the speech, religion, and equality. It is a speech, religion, and equality. And you see that there are certain fundamental rights which are applicable only to citizens. Only to citizens. That is 15, 16, 19, 29, 30. There are only certain fundamental rights which are applicable only to citizens, that is 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30. And you also definitely see the constitutional right to vote. Constitutional right to vote is only applicable to citizens. But whereas when you look at the non-citizens, here non-citizens are also referred as what? Aliens. Non-citizens are also referred as aliens. And when you see these aliens, again there could be two. One is friendly, the other one is the enemy aliens. Now when you look at friendly aliens, one thing is differentiating. Certain civilian rights are allowed with friendly aliens, but there is no provision of political rights. There is no provision of political rights. They mostly derive civil rights, but they also have certain restrictions on fundamental rights. They mostly derive civil rights. They're having restrictions on fundamental rights and no political rights at all. But whereas when you look at enemy, in fact, they do not have any sort of rights in the state. They do not have any sort of rights in the state. No civil, neither civil nor political. Right? So that is another important consideration that you need to remember. Now when you look at refugees, these are majorly resultant of what? These are majorly resultant of certain state persecutions. One classic example that you keep hearing about is who? Rohingyas. Rohingyas. Due to majorly state persecution. And when you look at refugees, mostly they have international protection. Mostly they have international protection. And to be specific, Article 33 of Refugee Convention. You don't have to remember the article, but just for your information I'm giving. Refugee Convention of 1951. And you also see Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is an international protection to refugees. Is India part of the Refugee Convention 1951? No. India is not part of 1951 Refugee Convention, right? So that is another important takeaway that you need to remember here with respect to the aspects of citizenship. And in the context of India, one more dimension that you need to remember here is that all the provisions regarding citizenship are made by Parliament. Right? Parliament decides upon the citizenship, both the acquisition as well as the termination. Both the acquisition as well as the termination. And please remember, Constitution does not talk about the methods. Constitution do not mention the methods of acquisition or termination. It is who is going to decide? Parliament. Constitution just says that Parliament is going to be the supreme authority in deciding them, right? Then apart from that, you majorly have the Citizenship Act of 1955, which is going to govern all of this, which is governing the acquisition, the termination, and other matters related to citizenship. Acquisition, termination, and other matters related to citizenship. And India, what kind of citizenship? Is it dual or single? Single citizenship in India. Single citizenship in India. Yes? Okay. Now when you look at the third component here, the component of sovereignty. The third component is the component of sovereignty. Now sovereignty is all about independence. Independence majorly in what? Decision making. And decision making regarding both the internal as well as the external aspects. And it is majorly centered around the security of state. It is majorly centered around the security of state. It is dependent upon principles of unity and integrity. It is dependent upon the principles of unity and integrity, and abide by the principle of non-interference. Abide by the principle of non-interference. And at this context, if you look at the nature of India, right? Just write down 2-3 lines here. Nature of Indian Union. Is it part of preamble? Is it mentioned in preamble? Yes, no, sovereignty as a principle is mentioned in preamble. Is it mentioned anywhere else? Anywhere else or only in preamble? Hmm? Fundamental duties. You have no sovereignty, unity, and integrity coming together. Ensuring the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of the nation. Fundamental duties. So it is part of preamble, it is part of fundamental duties. Anywhere else is it mentioned? Anywhere else is it mentioned? Sovereignty. You please remember, in the reasonable restrictions of Article 19, Clause 2, there is an implicit understanding of that why you have a clause of security of state. In Article 19, Clause 2, the reasonable restrictions which are imposed on 19, Clause 1, what do you have? There is an explicit mentioning of security of state, which implicitly means it has the aspects regarding sovereignty. Right? Now, write down here nature. It is non-destructible union. Non-destructible union with destructible states. Non-destructible union with destructible states. Next, not based on agreement. Not based on agreement. In bracket you write a union of states, not federation of states. Union of states, not federation of states. Next, you know that the territory is more than union. Territory of India is more than union of India. Now, when we say territory of India, you see state, union territories as well as acquired territories. State, union territories as well as acquired territories. Now, when you look at Union of India, it is including what? States alone. It's having states alone. Right. Now, one more line you write. The word Bharat. The word Bharat is interchangeably used in Indian Constitution. The word Bharat is interchangeably used in Indian Constitution. Next, Article 2 and 3 of Constitution. Article 2 and 3 of Constitution deals with the territorial rearrangements. Deals with the territorial rearrangements. In bracket, boundaries, name, comma, addition or deletion of territory, comma, addition or deletion of a territory. Next, the changes, or put it the other way, the rearrangements as part of Article 2 and 3. The rearrangements as part of Article 2 and 3 are not part of Article 368. Are not part of Article 368. In bracket Article 4. In bracket Article 4. Next, The changes made as part of Article 3, the changes made as part of Article 3 demands prior permission of the President, prior permission of the President, and 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 a reference made to state, and a reference made to state. In bracket you write, state's decision is not binding on President. State's decision is not binding on President. Right? Now here you just remember certain aspects of states and reorganization. Now you see, we had certain colonial influence with respect to the broader division of states, that is Part A, Part B and Part C, and we had some with respect to Part D. When you look at Part A, these are mostly sharing the cultural and linguistic ties. These are mostly sharing the cultural and linguistic ties. When you look at Part B, these are based on local identities. These are based on local identities. When you look at Part C, these are centrally administered. These are centrally administered. And Part D, we only had one, that is Andaman and Nicobar. Andaman and Nicobar. Right? Now, that is the easiest that you can remember broadly, because it's very tough to remember individual state. What was the original? This is original. From there, based on local identities, this something which are dealing with borders and which demanded more security were majorly centrally administered. And last is Andaman and Nicobar. Now, when you look at the order of reorganization that has happened to a larger extent, in 1960, it is Gujarat and Maharashtra. In 1960, it is Gujarat and Maharashtra. Then 61, 62, 63 respectively. Here Goa, Pondicherry, Nagaland, Goa, Pondicherry, Nagaland. Then when you look at 1966, it is Himachal, Punjab, Haryana. But here you have to understand, Himachal acquired its full statehood in 1971. Although it was declared autonomous, but Himachal acquired its full statehood in 1971. Right? Now, the similar case with respect to Goa that we discussed, where you see one separation that happened here was in 1987. 1987 with respect to dominant DU, with respect to dominant DU, right? Then when look at 1970s, mostly it was northeastern state. One is in 1972 we had MTM, that is Manipur, Tripura, Meghalaya. In 1975 we had Sikkim, 1975 Sikkim. In 1987 Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh, and I already told you Goa as separate state, because 1961 it was a combination of Goa and Daman and Diu. In 1987 they got separated, right? So 1987 you have Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh. And coming to the nascent states 2000, where you see Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand, 2014 Telangana, 2019 you have the case of Jammu and Kashmir changing, or you have the status of Jammu and Kashmir changing, right? One separation which happened early in northeast was Nagaland, one that you can remember. The other one was most of the northeast was in 1970s. Generally this is the focus, right? 72 we had MTM, 75 we had Sikkim, right? Major classification. And 87 was another important aspect, because most of the times you see it is northeastern states which are focused by UPSC. Okay, right? So this is the first aspect of polity. Now slowly we'll get into the components and the principles of constitution from tomorrow onwards, right? For today the theory part will stop at this. I'll introduce an elimination technique to you, right? The first technique of polity that we are going to discuss for today is we are discussing the technique regarding constitution. In the constitution, again mention, define, classify, specify is the technique. What is more probable? This is more probable among all of this. If they tell you it is mentioned in the constitution, most of the times yes. If they tell you no, it is defined in the constitution, 99.9% no. What is the logic there? I keep telling, already constitution is huge, and if I start defining every term of constitution, it's going to become uncontrollably voluminous, which is very difficult for a citizen to understand. And classification, specification, that is again, whichever is getting very specific, that is not there as part of constitution. Let's look at those basic. This is the first technique in polity, and when you look at the first question in 2025, you look at the first statement here. Hope it's visible. Anpistundamma? Yes. Should I expand or is it fine? It's fine. Fantastic. The Constitution of India explicitly mentions that in certain spheres the governor of state acts in or explicitly mentions. And what is the one line that I've given you? Constitutional discretion is more in the case of whom? Governor. If it was president, I would have questioned the statement. But now, I don't have to, because what is it telling? Is it defining or is it mentioning? Mentioning. Right? And what is explicit? Written. Implicit? Interpretations. Right? That's very clear. Okay. So, that's one statement that you can happily manage using this technique. Now, you look at this. You look at the second statement of this particular question. There is no mention of the word political party in the Constitution of India. What did I tell you? 99% I would see mentioning. Define? No. Specify? No. Yes? Now what is happening? They are telling? It is not mentioned. Is it not mentioned? It is mentioned. It is mentioned. What about defection? 52nd, 91st amendments. Now, is it telling in the original constitution? If the statement was like there is no mention of the word political party in the original constitution, fantastically correct. But if they are just telling you constitution means what? It includes original constitution plus amendments. So this is correct statement or incorrect? Incorrect. Because we already have 100 plus amendments, my dear. And it is just talking about what? Mentioning. It is never talking about classifying, specifying. There is nothing specific there, right? Now look at the second statement of this question. According to the provisions of Constitution of India, a member of the House on being elected as Speaker shall resign from his or her political party immediately. Right? Now one thing that I already told you is what? There is no detailing of procedures in Constitution. That is what the generalization I spoke about. Yes. Now is this the case in Indian Constitution or is it the case with Britain? It's a case with whom? Britain. In India, is it mandatory? No. Are you understanding this dimension? Again, what will happen, my dear? You would have combined and studied that. No. We had something called as anti-defection. And we had something called as speaker is an independent office and it should be neutral, it should be politically neutral. All of this you would have studied, and slowly in the exam hall, what would you interpret? Again, you're confused there. Right? And the beauty of all of this is what? These are sourced from one of the most important sources that we study, that is Lakshmikant. But the problem is what? When it comes to application, it's going to be tough there, right? Next. And look at 2024. Look at this particular question. As per Article 368, the Parliament may amend any provision of the Constitution by the way of. What is it asking you? May amend, which is a broader function or narrow function? Broad. When I am amending, I will add something, I am amending something. When I am varying something, I am amending something. When I am repealing something, I am amending something. It is just like 5 plus 1 is 6. I have amended it. Right? 5 to 5.5. I have amended it. 5 minus 1. I have amended it. Amendment is all about what? Some change. Again, a broader function here. Next. 68th question. Now, one problem with such questions is everybody starts questioning this. Article 109 mentions the special procedures in respect of money bill. Now take it for granted, my dear. Most of the times, articles mentioned are right. Parts mentioned are right. Now you please understand, examiner is categorically picking 109. The number itself is very weird. If he wanted to do something and if he wanted to play with your mind, he could have simply given article 110. Yes or no? He could have simply given what article? 110. If article 110 was given, will the statement be right? No. Now, don't be very skeptical about what articles, parts, laws, years in history, as well as polity. They are not going to test all of this with you. They are not going to test all of this with you. Now, they would never test years with respect to history. They would never say 1857 revolt happened in 1856. No. That's not going to happen. Okay. Right. Next. I told you, no, same example here. But I'll give you some logic here with respect to 74th question. Now here, most of us are not very sure about emergency provisions because they are not asking about articles, but what are they asking? Parts. And we are not very sure about what is that provisions related to the amendment also. Chodo usko. But we are very sure about part 9 and part 9A. This deals with Panchayat Raj, this deals with municipalities. Fantastic. But we also know this municipalities deals with what article? 243 around, right? Now, what is the article of emergency? What is the article of emergency? 352. Approximate, I am talking about 352 to 360. I am not getting into the exact business. If this is part 9, what are they saying? This is part 18. Leave it there, I am not very sure. But I definitely know amendment is 368. When amendment is 368, what are they telling? They are telling it is part 20. If 368 is part 20, can't 352 be part of 18? Approximate again. Right? Why? Because 352 is not single article, but rather it is spreading up to 360. Now 352 to 360 is 18. What is missing in middle? 19th part. 20th part is 360. I know this is factually right. I know these two are logically correct. What's going to happen? Are you understanding this? Now again, most of the people, what they started doing, they started rounding up these parts and they started putting question marks. You're not going to get anything there. What are we following here? We are fundamentally following one factual approach. We know, knowing what you're supposed to know and deriving from what you know. And I am deriving these parts from what you know because most of us don't focus on parts. Right? At least I don't remember parts. So in that, what will I know? I know articles, so I will derive that. And I am not looking at relation between these two, but rather I am looking at relation between these two. Don't you think examiner also would have framed this question based on this only? If he wanted, he could have given some in part 13, one in part 9, one in part 20. He could have done that. But why was he talking about part 18 and part 20? He wanted you to logically deduce that these two are close. Are you understanding this logic? Again, this is not going to go with the knowledge. This is only going to happen in the exam hall with this manner, right? Now coming to the question in 2023. Now you see, look at the third statement here. When a bill is present to the President of India, the Constitution prescribes the time limit. What is the word that I told you? There is no time limit mentioned in the constitution except the tenures of the constitutional office. That is a generalization that I have given if you go back and refer. So is this statement right or wrong? Incorrect. Are you understanding this, right? Are you getting it, right? That is how we apply generalizations as part of eliminations, right? And what is this generalization going to give you? Generalization will give you somewhere where you don't know something, and it is also going to give you confirmation as well. Now look at second statement here. Article 335 of the Constitution defines. Does it define? You don't understand the beauty of eliminating it till you read the first statement. The Supreme Court of India has held in some judgments that the reservation policy made under would be limited by Article 335 for maintenance of administrative efficiency. You were supposed to know Article 335 with respect to administrative efficiency, but if you didn't know also, you definitely know nothing is defined. When you eliminate second statement, what is going to be the answer? Statement 2 is incorrect. Statement 1 has to be correct. Now, what is the way that you solve these statements, my dear? First, verify whether statement 1 is right or wrong. Then go to statement 2, see whether statement 2 is right or wrong. Right? If statement 1 is right and statement 2 is wrong, then your option is C. If statement 1 is wrong and statement 2 is right, then your option is D. But one case is when you have both the statements right. That means when both statement 1 and statement 2 are right, what is your next consideration? You will have to see whether statement 2 is the reason for statement 1. That is the algorithm. First, verify whether statement 1 is right or wrong, statement 2 is right or wrong, and then you see, is statement 2 the reason for statement 1? If statement 2 is the reason for statement 1, then automatically what's going to happen? It's going to be option A. But if statement 2 and statement 1 are not at all connected, then it is automatically going to be option B. That's a simple algorithm that you'll have to follow in statement based. When 3 statements come, I'll tell you again, right? Next. See, today is first day, so I can understand. And we had certain administrative aspects, so the class is little bit extended. Okay, so bear with the extension. From tomorrow, I think everything will fall in place, right? I understand you people have got up at 6 o'clock, which is not very usual, right? I can see the pain in your face. That's okay. You'll get used to it. Okay. According to the Constitution of India, the central government has a duty to protect the state from internal disturbance. Okay, chodo. Constitution of India exempts the state from providing legal counsel to a person being held for preventive detention. What is it talking about? Don't you think this is a statement which is extremely specific on Constitution? It is telling exempting legal counsel for whom, my dear? Not a person under detention broadly, but preventive detention. Right? Now you tell me one thing. Is it upholding human rights? Huh? No. The second criteria that I see for Constitution is what? It has to be inclusive, it has to be progressive. Then only the statement is correct. Otherwise what? It's going to go incorrect. You please understand this. Understand the logic. What is a positive statement? The statement which is inclusive is a positive statement. The statement which is a progressive statement is a positive statement. The statement which is dealing with good governance is a positive statement. And when I have all of these dynamics in a positive statement, that becomes what? Right statement. And if any element of this is missing, automatically it is going to turn into what? Incorrect statement. Right? Next. You will only understand. Don't worry. Don't worry. Look at this. Directly go to third statement in this question. The Constitution defines. Does it define? Nothing is defined in constitution. इसको छोड़ो. अब you eliminate 3, you're left with 1, 2, 1, 2, 4. Now directly go to fourth statement. In India, the parliament is vested with powers to make laws on contempt of court. Obvious, you have Contempt of Court Act. If it is an act, who is making it? Parliament. So automatically answer is what? 1 to 4. You would understand the beauty of this only if you read first statement. Look at first statement. Pursuant to the report of H.N. Sanyal report, the Contempt of Court Act was passed. How many of you know about this person? అసలు ఆ రిపోర్ట్ అన్నది ఏదన్నా ఉందని తెలుసా నీకు? Are you understanding? Right? UPSC is only questioning you what you're supposed to know. Even if you don't know that, it gave you an option that 1 to 4 and 1 to in that. But what you people do? You people will start writing committees on H.N. Sanyal committee. Committee reports, I'm telling you. And what do? You overemphasize on knowledge, my dear, and I don't even understand why people are giving so much of material for reading. Don't you think so many questions we are solving only on 4 or 5 lines of generalization that I told you? And that only comes with understanding. And that is not with respect to reading PDFs after PDFs and being overwhelmed by knowledge or something, right? Look at the first statement. The Constitution of India classifies. I know classification is very rare. Now look at this, classifies the ministers into 4 ranks. Very specific again. Cabinet minister, minister of state, independent charge minister. అంత క్లాసిఫై చేసే పని ఉంటే డిప్యూటీ చీఫ్ మినిస్టర్, డిప్యూటీ ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ ఉండాలా? Yes or no? But is it there? Right? I told you, classification becomes near impossible. If I keep on classifying again, what is going to happen to the volume of the constitution? Increasing. Next. This is fine. This you can manage. Defection. Look at this question. Attorney General of India and Solicitor General are the only officers who are allowed to participate in the meetings of the Parliament. Usko chodo. According to Constitution of India, the Attorney General of India submits his resignation when the government which appointed him resigns. Extremely procedural. When anything is extremely procedural, can it be mentioned in Constitution? Is the procedure for the impeachment of judges mentioned? Procedure for the impeachment of judges or removal of judges. Is it mentioned? No. In the Constitution, is it mentioned? No. And I already told you, anything that is extremely procedural is definitely not part of Constitution. Look at this question. Surprisingly, the same logic will also be applied in wherever it is their Constitution. You see, certain provisions of Constitution of India gives the central government the right to issue directions to. If this was the case, RBI should have been mentioned somewhere in the Constitution. Yes, is it mentioned in the Constitution? Is it constitutional body or statutory? Statutory. RBI Act we have. If it was constitutional body, was it necessary to have RBI Act? See this, my dear. See the beauty. See the beauty. UPSC is telling you it is RBI Act. If it is RBI Act, will it be there? No. Obviously no. Then you remove 2, what will happen? Are you understanding? Right? How are we applying generalizations? Yes, last question. Now you tell me first. Defines. Does it define basic structure? right? The Constitution of India provides for judicial, provides, yes, mentions, yes, classifies, not very sure, defines, not very sure, extremely procedural, not very sure. Are you understanding, right? One more last question and then we can break for the day. According to the Constitution of India, a person who is eligible to vote can be made a minister in state for 6 months. You read that statement. For 6 months, even if he is not a member of legislature of that state. స్టేట్మెంట్ అర్థమైందా కాలేదు ఫస్ట్ రీడింగ్లో కాలేదంటే తప్పు, రైట్? నౌ వాట్ ఈస్ హ్యాపెనింగ్, ఈస్ టెల్లింగ్ హూ ఈస్ ఎలిజిబుల్ టు ఓట్ క్యాన్ బి minister. This fellow 18, this fellow minimum how much, 25. How is it possible? Don't you think all the politicians' sons, as soon as they attain 18, will be a minister then? Kada రోడ్ల మీద కాకుండా డెఫినెట్లీ దే వుడ్ హావ్ బీన్ మినిస్టర్స్ ఎనీ గివెన్ డే, right? According to RBI, person convicted, ठीक है, उसको तो कर सकते हैं आप. I'll tell you, we'll discuss anyway other parts. Now look at second statement here. The Constitution of India provides for 3 sessions, but it is not mandatory to conduct all 3. Does it provide for 3? Provides for 3? Or does it state that the maximum gap between 2 sessions can be how much? 6 months. Does it say 3 sessions? Or is it convention or constitution? Convention. Are you understanding again, right? Again, this is turning out to be what, my dear? Extremely procedural, extremely specific. Because if I start getting into the specifics, and constitution is going to go what? Beyond. Right? I will leave last question for you and one more last. Right? This you will enjoy. Now see the state. It's a big question, right? In fact, in the question paper, one side almost was consumed by this question. Okay? The motion to impeach a judge cannot be rejected. Usko chodo. Constitution of India defines. Does it define anything? I am not even reading the second part. You remove second. Only one is removed. Okay, we'll see. The details of the procedure of impeachment is given in Judges Enquiries Act. Okay. If the motion for impeachment is taken up, the law requires the motion to be backed by each house of the parliament and supported by a majority of the total membership and by not less than 2/3 of the total members of that house. Now you tell me one thing. If some examiner is giving this statement, is it a given statement or is it a made statement? There are only 2 statements in the exam. Some statements are given, some statements are made. What are these made statements? That fellow will do some kirikiri in the statement and change it. And generally, it is observed that most of the statements which are long are not made, but rather they are given. I would talk more upon this given and made statements as we progress. You would understand this difference of what is a given statement, what is a made statement as we progress. Is this clear? Yes. So this is how our approach is going to be for next 45 days. Right? And one small and humble request is kindly adjust your sleep cycle. Because I understand today is the first day and I understand some of you dozing off, right? If you're making an effort to come and sit in the class at 6 o'clock, I don't find a point for you to doze. Right? So kindly adjust for next 45 days, and I already told you the purpose of having this at 6 o'clock. Why? Ensure consistency, one. And more importantly, let me tell you, my dear, the rest of the day is going to go well. Why? Because now, as soon as you get up at 5 or 5:30 and come to class at 6, you automatically have an achiever feeling. I'm not joking. And from today onwards, your walking style also will change. Little just up, and for a reason that you're getting up early, you're coming early, and by the time you go back, your friends are still getting ready. You have finished 2.5 revision or 2.5 hours of effective revision of what? Polity. And you do this effective revision for 6 days, you are done with polity. Where other people are still waking up, some are still on their bed. It is winter, I understand. Now yesterday one parent had called me and said, sir, you are sadist. Why are you starting class at 6 o'clock in the morning? That too winter. Right? And my answer is very simple. This is December. For us, we will have to balance both prelims and mains. If I put in any other time period, I am going to disturb your mains schedule. Because I cannot leave December and Jan mid without optional. I cannot do that. I didn't want to disturb your rest of the day. If I didn't want to disturb your rest of the day and make you feel like an achiever for the rest of the day, I was supposed to keep it at 6 o'clock. Right? I don't have any happiness in this. But although it doesn't matter if it is at 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm all ready. But for you, I would request you to adjust your timings. From tomorrow onwards, I will leave you at the time that is specified. Right? Only for today, you just bear with the delay for the reason of the procedural aspects. Is this clear? Are these procedures mentioned in the Constitution? No. Right? Are they specific? No. Right? That's it from my side for today. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.